It started with a sign, a small piece of cardboard that would change everything. On a chilly spring morning in Central Park, billionaire Ethan Cole was the last person anyone expected to stop for a stranger. The man who once owned half the skyline of Manhattan, who hadn't spoken to a child in years, froze when he saw her. A little girl, no more than 8, sat by the fountain, her cheeks streaked with tears, clutching a sign that read in shaky black marker, "Need a dad for the father-daughter dance." If this moment stopped you in your tracks, imagine what it did to him. Stay with this story because what happens next will challenge what you believe about lost love and second chances. For Ethan, mornings were supposed to be predictable coffee silence and spreadsheets. But that day, the park felt different. The laughter of joggers, the chatter of tourists, it all blurred when he saw her. She wasn't begging for money or attention. She was just waiting for someone who would never come. The world moved past her, but Ethan couldn't. Something in that tiny, desperate sign reached into the part of him he thought had died years ago, the part that still remembered his daughter's voice calling him Daddy before a drunk driver took her away. He hesitated, adjusting the cuff of his tailored coat, as if the motion could shield him from emotion. But her quiet sob broke through every layer of armor he had built. He walked toward her, his footsteps slow, deliberate, the sound of gravel under his shoes filling the silence between them. When she finally looked up, her eyes were red but steady. "Are you lost, sweetheart?" he asked, his voice rougher than he intended. The girl shook her head. "No, sir. I'm waiting for my dad." "But he's not coming." Ethan swallowed hard. "And your mom?" "She's working at the diner," she said softly. "She said maybe someone nice would see me and help." There was no drama in her tone, no manipulation, just honesty. The kind that cracked even the coldest hearts. Her name was Lily. She lived in a small apartment near Brooklyn Bridge with her mother, Claire. And all she wanted was one thing: to go to the father-daughter dance next Friday. Ethan didn't know what to say. The request was so small, yet so immense. His throat tightened. He hadn't been to a dance since his wife and daughter's funeral. He thought he'd forgotten how to feel, but this little girl with her trembling hands and hopeful eyes was reminding him that grief and love were sometimes the same thing in disguise. He knelt to her level, careful not to frighten her. What if he began slowly? "I could help with that dance." Her eyes widened, suspicious at first. "You'd do that, even if you don't know me. I didn't know my daughter's teacher or her friends or the people who loved her after she was gone," he said quietly. "Sometimes not knowing doesn't matter. Showing up does." For a long moment she said nothing. Then she smiled, a small, cautious smile that made something shift inside him. He helped her gather her things, her backpack, her sign, and offered to walk her home. As they walked along the path, passers-by whispered, some curious, others skeptical. None of them knew that both the billionaire and the little girl were carrying the same invisible wound: abandonment. When they reached her apartment building, Claire opened the door, her face tense. Her uniform smelled of coffee and exhaustion. "Lily, where have you been? I told you not to." She stopped mid-sentence when she saw Ethan standing there, immaculate suit, $1,000 shoes looking strangely out of place in the cracked hallway. "I'm sorry, ma'am," he said quickly. "Your daughter was alone in the park. She told me about the dance." Claire's eyes softened but stayed guarded. "You don't have to get involved. People stop, feel sorry, and move on. That's how it goes." Ethan shook his head. Not this time. The words came out before he could stop them. Claire studied him for a long moment, then nodded slightly. "If you mean it, the dance is next Friday. But if you hurt her even by leaving, you'll break more than her heart." Ethan met her gaze. "I understand." As he turned to leave, Lily ran up and hugged his arm. "Thank you, Mr. Cole," he said softly. Ethan Cole. She repeated his name like it was something important, something safe. He smiled faintly and walked away, unaware that a passerby had captured the entire moment on a phone. By nightfall, that clip would explode across social media with the caption, "Billionaire stops for a crying girl with a sign." The internet would call it inspiring, heartbreaking, fake, miraculous. But for Ethan, it wasn't a headline. It was the first real heartbeat he'd felt in years. And for Lily, it was the first flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, someone would show up this time. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He sat by his window overlooking the city that once made him feel untouchable, and for the first time it looked small. On his desk lay the cardboard sign Lily had left behind, smudged and wrinkled. He traced the letters with his fingers, whispering the words to himself. "Need a dad for the father-daughter dance." He exhaled shakily. Maybe the universe was giving him one last chance to make things right. He picked up his phone, scrolled to a contact he hadn't called in years, a tailor, and murmured, "I need a suit." Not for business, for a dance. And as the lights of New York shimmered against the glass, the man who had everything finally decided to give something that mattered. The morning after their first meeting, Ethan Cole stood outside a small diner near the Brooklyn Bridge, its neon sign flickering against the gray dawn. He wasn't used to waiting. People usually waited for him, assistants, investors, board members, but that day he waited for a woman who owed him nothing. Through the fogged window, he could see her moving between tables, refilling coffee cups, smiling at customers who barely looked up. Claire Carter carried herself like someone who had been tired for years, but refused to stop. When she finally noticed him standing outside, her expression hardened. She stepped out into the cold, tying her apron around her waist. "You shouldn't have come," she said. "Lily told me you offered to take her to the dance. I appreciate the kindness, but we don't need charity." "It's not charity," Ethan said quietly. "It's a promise. I told her I'd be there, and I keep my promises." Claire crossed her arms. "With all due respect, men who make promises to my daughter usually don't keep them." Ethan didn't flinch. He'd heard the same tone before, disbelief mixed with the ache of being disappointed too many times. "I can't change what other men did," he said. "But I can change what I do." For a long moment they just stood there, the hum of the city moving around them. Finally, Claire sighed. "She hasn't stopped talking about you," she admitted. "She even drew a picture of the two of you dancing. She said you smiled like someone who forgot how." Ethan almost laughed, but the truth in her words stung too much. "Maybe she reminded me." Claire studied him again. His clothes, his composure, his carefully measured tone, none of it fit the world she lived in. "You really want to do this?" "Yes," he said without hesitation. "But not if you're uncomfortable. I'll respect whatever you decide." Her jaw softened. "All right, the dance is Friday at 7. If you're serious, you'll show up." Ethan nodded once. "I'll be there." He left the diner with something he hadn't felt in years, anticipation. That afternoon, he did something that shocked even himself. He drove out of Manhattan past his glass towers and spotless penthouse and stopped at a small thrift boutique near Williamsburg. He asked the clerk for help choosing a little girl's dress. The woman, surprised to see a billionaire in her shop, led him to a rack of children's clothes. He picked a pale blue dress with silver trim, something that shimmered when the light caught it. When he handed it to the cashier, she smiled. "Someone's got a special night coming up." "Yeah," he said softly. "Someone does." Later that week, he returned to the park where he'd first met Lily. She was there again, sitting on the same bench, drawing with colored pencils. When she saw him, she grinned so wide it nearly broke him. "You came back. I said I would," he replied. "And I brought you something." He handed her the box wrapped in plain brown paper. She tore it open, carefully gasping when she saw the dress. It's beautiful, she whispered. You'll need it for Friday, Ethan said. But there's one more thing. You can't just show up, you have to know how to dance. Her eyes went wide. You know how to dance, I used to, he said, smiling faintly. I might be rusty. They practiced under the fading light of the park's lampposts. Ethan placed her small hand on his arm, guiding her gently through the steps. She giggled when he stumbled. You're not very good at this, she teased. I'm out of practice, he said, but I'll get better. Someone nearby stopped to watch, then another. A jogger pulled out his phone. A mother with a stroller whispered to her friend, Isn't that Ethan Cole? Within minutes, strangers were filming their faces glowing with quiet awe. By nightfall, a video titled Billionaire Dances with Little Girl in Central Park had flooded the internet. Half the world saw it as beautiful. The other half saw it as calculated. Claire saw it during her late-night shift on a coworker's phone. That's your daughter, the woman said, astonished. And that's Ethan Cole. What's going on? Claire didn't answer. She just stared at the screen, her throat tight. The image of her little girl, laughing free and unguarded, did something to her heart she hadn't expected. She closed the app, trying not to cry. The next morning, Ethan returned to the diner. Claire was waiting for him this time, holding a newspaper. His face was on the front page beneath the headline, Cold-Hearted Tycoon Finds His Soul. She set it down on the counter. You didn't tell me people were filming. I didn't know, Ethan said. I didn't plan any of it. People will think you're doing this for attention. Let them, he said quietly. Lily knows the truth. For the first time, Claire saw something in his eyes, not arrogance or guilt, but sincerity, the kind that comes from loss. What happened to your daughter? She asked softly. Ethan hesitated, his voice barely above a whisper. She died when she was 7. I was supposed to be at her recital, but I was too busy. I missed my chance to show up. I won't make that mistake again. Claire looked away, her hand trembling as she poured coffee into a mug. Lily's been waiting her whole life for someone to show up, she said. If you're really doing this for her, then don't back out when people start talking. I won't, he promised. Not for anything. On Friday evening, just before sunset, Ethan arrived at their apartment. He wore a navy suit, polished shoes, and a silver tie. Lily came running out in her blue dress, twirling in the hallway. Do I look like a princess? She asked. You look perfect, he said, smiling. Claire stood in the doorway, her eyes glassy but proud. You two have fun, she said softly. Ethan offered his arm. Shall we? Princess Lily nodded, beaming. As they stepped outside the city, lights blinked on like tiny stars, and for the first time in years, Ethan felt something he'd almost forgotten existed: hope. Behind them, Claire watched through the window, whispering to herself, maybe this time he'll really stay. The gymnasium of PS 142 glowed under strands of silver lights and paper lanterns. The air was thick with the scent of punch and vanilla, frosting the kind of sweetness that clings to memory. Fathers in crisp shirts and daughters in sparkling dresses filled the room, laughter spilling into the halls. Ethan Cole stood at the entrance, one hand adjusting his cufflinks, the other gripping the invitation Lily had given him. He had faced billion-dollar deals without blinking, but tonight the tremor in his hands betrayed him. He wasn't here as a businessman. He was here as a promise. Lily spotted him first. She stood near the stage in her pale blue dress, her silver shoes glinting beneath the lights. When her eyes met his, her whole face lit up. She ran across the room, weaving through clusters of families until she reached him. You came, she breathed, clutching his hand. I told you I would, Ethan said, smiling. For a moment, it felt like the rest of the world fell away. the gossip, the stares, the headlines. It was just the two of them, a girl and a man, both trying to remember how to belong. But when they stepped farther inside, the whispering began. A few parents leaned toward each other, voices hushed but sharp. "That's him, the billionaire. Is this some kind of publicity stunt, poor kid, she doesn't know?" Ethan ignored it. He focused on Lily's excitement, her small hand tugging at his. "Come on," she said. "They're about to start." They walked together toward the dance floor, but before they could take a step, a woman in a gray blazer intercepted them. "Mr. Cole," she asked carefully. "I'm Principal Harris. Could I speak with you for a moment?" Ethan nodded and leaned down to whisper to Lily. "Wait right here, sweetheart. I'll be right back." In the corner office behind the stage, Harris folded her hands. "I want to thank you for being here tonight, but I also need to address some concerns." "Concerns," Ethan repeated. "Some parents are uncomfortable," she said. "Given your visibility, the media attention, and the fact that you're not her legal guardian." Ethan took a slow breath. "I understand." She hesitated, studying his expression. "I can see you care about her. But these events are meant for family. People can be protective." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Do you know what it's like to watch a child stand in a park, holding a sign that says she just wants someone to show up for her because I do, and I'll take every headline, every whisper, every ounce of judgment if it means she doesn't have to feel alone tonight?" The principal's eyes softened. "You really mean that?" "I do," he said quietly. There was a knock at the door. It opened to reveal a small, determined voice. "If he can't stay," Lily said, her chin trembling, "then I'm not dancing either." Harris blinked, surprised. "He showed up when nobody else did," Lily said, clutching the skirt of her dress. "That's what dads are supposed to do, right?" The room went still. Ethan felt something tighten in his throat. Harris sighed, then nodded. "All right, you both can stay." Lily squealed and ran into Ethan's arms. He exhaled deeply, pressing his forehead to hers. "You sure told her," he whispered. "I learned from the best," she said, grinning. Back in the gym, the music had already begun, a soft old tune, something timeless. Ethan led Lily onto the dance floor. The crowd parted, slightly uncertain, but watching. She placed her tiny hand in his, the other resting on his sleeve. "Do I step here?" she asked, looking down. "Just follow me," he said. At first, their movements were clumsy, hesitant. But then, as the rhythm settled, something unspoken clicked. Her laughter rose bright and fearless, filling the air round them. Ethan's chest ached, not with grief this time, but with gratitude. Each spin, each step felt like rewriting a page of his past. For the first time in years, he wasn't haunted by what he'd lost. He was grateful for what he'd found. As they danced, other fathers began to watch, not out of suspicion, but admiration. One man clapped softly. Another smiled. Soon, the whole gym seemed to shift, like the air itself had decided to believe again. Claire stood near the doorway, her coat still on from work, watching quietly. She hadn't meant to come, she'd told herself she didn't belong there, but something had drawn her in. When she saw Ethan lift Lily into the air, spinning her, as she squealed with joy, her eyes filled with tears. For years, she'd tried to be everything for her daughter. But tonight she saw something she couldn't give, alone, a sense of being chosen. Midway through the song, Lily leaned her head against Ethan's chest. "I can feel your heart," she said softly. Ethan smiled, his eyes wet. "It's been quiet for a long time," he said. "You woke it up." When the song ended, there was silence. Then slowly, the applause began. Not polite, genuine. It rippled through the crowd until it became a standing ovation. Parents, teachers, Even the principal clapped as Ethan and Lily stood in the center of the floor, stunned. Lily looked up, her face glowing. "Did we win something?" Ethan laughed. "Yeah," he whispered. "We did." Later that night, when the music faded and the lights dimmed, Ethan walked Lily outside. The cool air carried the hum of traffic from the nearby bridge. She leaned against his arm, sleepy but smiling. "Did you have fun?" he asked. "The best night ever," she murmured. "Do you think we can dance again next year?" He looked down at her, this small miracle, who had walked straight through his walls and said, "I'll be there. Every year, you have my word." Across the street, someone lifted a phone, snapping one last picture of the billionaire and the little girl under the streetlights hand in hand walking home. That image would circle the internet before morning, but for Ethan, it wasn't about the cameras or the applause. It was about the quiet truth of that moment that for one night in a gym filled with strangers he wasn't a headline or a tycoon. He was simply a father who had finally learned how to show up. The Monday after the dance, Ethan Cole's face was everywhere. His image hand in hand with a smiling little girl under the silver lights dominated morning news shows, trending hashtags and opinion columns. Headlines split the country in two. Billionaire redeems himself. Through act of kindness clashed with publicity. Stunt or genuine heart, he'd been called both a hero and a hypocrite before breakfast. Inside his office on the 42nd floor of Cole Industries, Ethan sat behind his desk, the city sprawled beneath him, yet all he could see was the reflection of a cardboard sign still burned into his mind. "Need a dad for the father-daughter dance." His assistant entered quietly. "The board's requesting an emergency meeting," she said. "They're concerned about the coverage." "Of course they are," Ethan murmured. He stood, straightened his tie, and walked into the conference room where a dozen faces waited all tight with corporate worry. One of the senior partners spoke first. "Ethan, you've built this company on discretion. This kind of viral attention, it's risky. Investors are nervous," about what Ethan asked calmly. "That I danced with a little girl who didn't have a father. They're questioning judgment," another board member said. "There's speculation about motives, even legal exposure. If you continue engaging publicly with this child, it could damage the brand." Ethan looked around the table. These were men and women who would never understand that his brand was the last thing on his mind. "Gentlemen, ladies," he said, "our brand survived recessions, lawsuits, and bad press. If it can't survive compassion, maybe it's not worth saving." The silence that followed was thick. Someone finally said, "So you're really doing this?" "I already did," Ethan said. "And I'm not done." He walked out before they could respond. That night, his inbox filled with messages. Some were from people thanking him, single parents, teachers, strangers who saw themselves in Lily's story. But others were cruel. Accusations, doubts, twisted motives. One email read, "Stay away from that child. She doesn't need your pity or your money." He deleted it, but the words stuck like thorns. Meanwhile, at the diner, Claire faced her own storm. Customers whispered behind their menus. Her boss pulled her aside. "Claire, we've had reporters calling. Some folks think you're exploiting that man's kindness. Maybe take a few days off until this blows over." She went home exhausted, her hands trembling as she unlocked the door. Lily was at the table, drawing hearts on a sheet of paper. "Mom," she said brightly, "Mr. Cole said we could go to the park this weekend." Claire forced a smile. "We'll see, sweetheart." She didn't have the heart to explain what the world could do to something pure. That weekend, Ethan showed up anyway. Claire met him at the door, her face tight with worry. "You shouldn't be here," she said. "People are talking. They're saying this is about your image, your guilt, your company, everything but the truth." "I can't control what they say," Ethan replied. But I can control what I do, she sighed, stepping aside. Lily's been waiting. In the living room, Lily looked up from her drawing. You came back. Ethan knelt beside her. I promised, didn't I? She threw her arms around his neck, and for a moment the noise of the world faded. But outside that small apartment the scrutiny only grew. Reporters camped near his building. Paparazzi trailed him. Someone published a story about his late daughter twisting her death into a convenient narrative of redemption through replacement. It gutted him. A week later, the board's decision arrived. Ethan was to take a temporary leave of absence from coal industries to protect corporate integrity. He read the memo twice, then smiled faintly. They thought they were punishing him. In truth, they were setting him free. The next morning, he drove to Brooklyn with a quiet conviction. Claire met him on the stoop. You look different, she said. I am, he replied. I resigned. Her eyes widened. You what I've been chasing the wrong legacy, he said. I can build another company any time. But this what Lily started this is what matters. He explained his idea a nonprofit foundation called Fathers for One Night. It would match volunteers with children who didn't have a father for school events, dances, recitals, science fairs. Every volunteer would go through background checks, training, and oversight. It wouldn't be about money or headlines, it would be about showing up. Claire listened silently. When he finished, she said, That's a beautiful idea. But people will still talk. Let them, Ethan said. They'll get bored eventually. Good always outlasts gossip. Together, they launched it from her kitchen table. Within weeks, emails poured in, single mothers offering gratitude, men volunteering from across the country, local schools asking for partnerships. For the first time in years, Ethan worked without profit margins or investors. Every hour felt lighter. But good news travels slowly. Bad news runs. When a talk show host accused the foundation of being an image rehab project, donations dipped overnight. A major sponsor withdrew. Claire found Ethan sitting on a park bench later that day staring at the skyline. You can't save everyone, she said gently. I'm not trying to, he replied. Just one at a time. She sat beside him. You already did. He glanced at her, understanding dawning between them. By summer, the foundation's first event took place at a community center in Nashville, Tennessee, a quiet town far from the noise of New York. They started small 8 volunteers, 12 kids, 1 rented gym. Ethan watched as children laughed. Fathers danced awkwardly and music filled the room. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. Claire stood beside him, her eyes glistening. You did it, she whispered. No, he said, watching Lily twirl with another volunteer. We did. Later that night, as the lights dimmed, Ethan helped stack chairs and clean up spilled punch. He looked around the empty gym, remembering the headlines, the boardroom, the whispers, and none of it mattered anymore. The price of kindness had been steep, his reputation, his company, his privacy. But standing there, hearing the faint echo of children's laughter, he realized something simple and profound. Kindness might cost you everything people think matters, but it gives you back everything that actually does. When he left the building, Lily was waiting by the car, her small hand waving in the dark. You coming, Dad? She called. Ethan froze for a heartbeat, his eyes stinging. Then he smiled. Yeah, sweetheart, he said softly. I'm coming. 1 year later, the sky over Nashville shimmered with the soft gold of spring. The community center on Willow Street, once quiet and crumbling, was alive with laughter music and the smell of fresh-baked cookies. It was the annual father-daughter dance reborn, renewed, and bigger than anyone imagined. Balloons arched across the entrance, fairy lights wrapped around every beam, and a banner hung across the doorway in painted letters. Fathers for One Night, where showing up changes everything. Ethan Cole stood at the edge of the dance floor, His tie slightly crooked, his hair dusted with gray. Around him, fathers, some biological, some volunteers, danced awkwardly with little girls in bright dresses. Each pair told a story. A truck driver who'd taken the night off to dance with his niece. A police officer twirling a girl from the local shelter. A volunteer who'd lost his own child smiling through tears as he spun another man's daughter beneath the lights. Lily, now 9, darted between them, her blue dress replaced with a lilac one she'd chosen herself. Her confidence glowed brighter than the decorations. She had a clipboard in one hand and a microphone in the other. "Okay, everyone," she said proudly, her voice carrying over the music. "Time for the group picture?" Ethan laughed, shaking his head. "You've become quite the boss," he said when she ran over to him. She grinned. "You taught me that showing up means leading too." He knelt to fix the small tiara slipping from her hair. "You sure you don't want to dance first?" "Later," she said. "I have something to do." She ran off toward a boy standing alone near the refreshment table. He was about her age, wearing a wrinkled button-down shirt, nervously holding a paper cup of punch. "Hey," Lily said softly. "Why aren't you dancing?" He shrugged. "My dad couldn't make it. Mom said it was okay to come anyway." Lily tilted her head, then smiled. "You don't need a dad to dance. You just need someone to dance with." She held out her hand. "Come on, I'll teach you." From across the room, Ethan watched her take the boy's hand and lead him to the dance floor. A hush fell as the two began to move to the soft rhythm of an old Frank Sinatra song. Then, one by one, other kids joined. Parents clapped. Volunteers smiled. The music swelled until the whole gym seemed to pulse with something bigger than sound, something like belonging. Claire stood beside Ethan, her eyes glassy. "She's turning into a force of her own," she said. "She always was," Ethan replied. Claire looked at him, her voice soft. "Do you ever think about how far we've come from that park in New York to this?" He nodded slowly. "Every day." It had been exactly a year since he filed the adoption papers, sitting in a small courthouse surrounded by paperwork and nerves. When the judge finally signed the final page, he remembered Lily whispering, "So it's real now," and his quiet answer, "It's always been real." Now, their home in Tennessee felt like something out of a quiet dream. A small porch, a garden Claire loved to tend, laughter that filled the evenings. Ethan still worked, just not for skyscrapers or investors. He'd poured his energy into Fathers for One Night, which had grown from a handful of volunteers into a national network with chapters in 27 states. What started as one little girl's wish had become a movement, a quiet revolution built on presence. The Foundation's website displayed real numbers now: over 1-800 kids paired with vetted volunteers, 40% improvement in school attendance for those enrolled, 60% reporting higher confidence. But for Ethan, the numbers were just proof of something he already knew. Kindness, when multiplied, never loses power. As the evening unfolded, a local reporter approached him. "Mr. Cole, people say this foundation changed the way communities think about mentorship and family. Did you ever imagine it would go this far?" Ethan smiled, glancing toward Lily. "I didn't imagine anything. I just followed one little girl holding a cardboard sign." The reporter lowered her mic. "Can I ask what's next for you?" He paused. "Next." He looked around the gym, the volunteers, the laughter, the families that didn't even know each other a year ago. "Next," he said, "I think I'll just keep showing up." After the last dance, when the crowd began to thin, Ethan found Lily sitting on the steps outside the gym, swinging her feet. The air was cool, the night clear. Fireflies winked in the grass. Tired, he asked, sitting beside her. She nodded. It was perfect. It was, he agreed. "You know, your speech was amazing. You didn't even look nervous." She smiled sleepily. That's because I wasn't talking to strangers. I was talking to family. Ethan's throat tightened. You really get it, don't you? She leaned her head on his shoulder. You taught me. They sat in silence, listening to the faint echo of music still playing inside. For Ethan, this moment felt like the full circle of everything he'd once lost and finally found again. The ache that had haunted him for years had turned into something softer gratitude, maybe even peace. Claire came out with a blanket and draped it over their shoulders. You two planning to sleep out here, she teased. Maybe, Lily murmured, already half asleep. Ethan smiled. She's earned it. Claire sat beside them, her hand brushing his. So have you. He looked at her, his voice quiet but certain. You know, for a long time, I thought legacy meant buildings and money. Turns out it's just this being here together. She nodded. And showing up. Yeah, he said softly. And showing up. Months later, Ethan stood at the ribbon-cutting ceremony for the Foundation's new national office. Behind him hung a framed photograph, the one that started it all. Lily, sitting on a park bench, holding that sign with shaky handwriting. Beneath it, an engraved plaque read, "Inspired by a promise kept." When he took the podium, he didn't talk about success or donations. He told a story, the same one that had changed his life. He ended simply, sometimes the smallest act a hand extended a promise made can rewrite the story of an entire life. We're all capable of that kind of grace. You just have to show up. The room erupted in applause, but Ethan barely heard it. His eyes had found Lily in the front row, grinning proudly. For the first time in decades, his world felt exactly right. That night, back home, Lily pulled him to the living room. One last dance, Dad, she asked. He laughed. Always. As they danced slowly under the soft glow of the lamp, Claire watched from the doorway, tears glinting in her eyes. The house, once filled with silence, now pulsed with life. The dance, it seemed, would never truly end. And maybe that was the point. Not every story needs a grand finale. Some simply keep moving, step by step, heart to heart, reminding us that love once awakened never runs out of music. When all the noise faded, the headlines, the whispers, the praise and the doubt, what remained was something simple and human, a man who learned to show up again. Ethan Cole began this story as a billionaire who had everything money could buy and nothing that mattered. One cold morning in Central Park, he met a little girl holding a sign that cracked open the silence he'd been living in. From that moment, his life stopped being about wealth or status. It became about redemption, about finding meaning in the act of caring. Through his journey, Ethan didn't rescue Lily, he recognized her. In her courage to ask for help, he saw the echo of his own daughter's voice and the second chance he never thought he'd get. He faced judgment, scandal, and loss, but through it all he kept a promise. And that promise grew into something far larger than one night at a school dance. It became a movement that restored dignity to families, hope to children, and purpose to men who had lost their way. Claire, Lily's mother, learned to trust again, to believe that kindness didn't always come with conditions. Lily, the brave little girl who just wanted someone to show up, became the living symbol of what love can build when it's chosen freely. And Ethan, once defined by skyscrapers and stock markets, found a legacy that no corporation could buy: the quiet, lasting beauty of presence. The story of Ethan, Claire, and Lily reminds us that heroism doesn't always come in grand gestures. Sometimes it begins with a small act, listening, showing up, keeping a promise. The dance wasn't just a night in a gym, it was a metaphor for life itself. The music keeps playing even when we stumble, even when we lose the rhythm. What matters is that we keep dancing with the people we love, with the moments that test us, with the chances that invite us to become better. The lesson is clear: kindness costs something, but the return is immeasurable. In a world that often rewards distance, choosing to care to be present to reach out is a quiet rebellion. You don't need wealth to change a life. Sometimes you only need to be there when someone is waiting. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of someone who showed up when you needed it most, share it. Tell someone their presence matters. And if you believe in stories that restore faith in humanity, subscribe to this channel. Your support keeps us creating meaningful stories. Like this one, stories that remind us that love, compassion, and hope are still alive. Because as long as we keep showing up for one another, the dance never truly ends.